Hi, this is Clay Hines, and you're listening to Pucklandia Podcast.
Foul by Dero to center. Ludwig shoots. He scores! Johnny Ludwig does it again!
I'm Johnny Ludwig, and you're listening to the Pucklandia Podcast.
Jarvis in close shot. There's a goal. Seth Jarvis, the 17-year-old, short side, glove side, high, just under the crossbar.
I'm Cross Hannes, and you're listening to the Pucklandia Podcast.
Cutting to the front of the net, and they score. Reese Newkirk along the right wing just took the pass. That was phenomenal patience from Seth Jarvis and the winner.
This is Nick Chichek, and you're listening to the Pucklandia Podcast. Hey, this is Reese Newkirk, and you're listening to the Pucklandia Podcast.
Hi, I'm Joel Holt of the Portland Winterhawks, and you're listening to Pucklandia Podcast.
Welcome into Pucklandia, the longest running and most downloaded podcast that's centered around the Portland Winterhawks. Pleased to be joined by Liz Child of Dub Network fame. How was been up here for a little while? How was the weekend for you?
It was incredible. A couple of dubs would have been really nice, but getting back into the arena, getting back into the swing of things was exciting. So can't complain.
So I know I've asked a lot out of you here the last a little while, but as far as back-to-back weeks, but I was kind of just looking at it like, especially the way the video feed went, for opening night, which is unfortunate, but also opening night. You're kind of one of the only humans in existence that got to see both games, and as far as being in the building both nights. So you mentioned already, that it was nice, but how nice was it to be in the building?
It was incredible. I was up here for the Neely Cup a couple weeks ago, but actually getting back into the arena for a real game opening night, it was actually my first trip to Kennewick. So it was the first time I was in the Toyota Center. So just getting back in that environment, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, I haven't been out there for a number of years. It's actually, that's not true. I went out there kind of right before shutdown, and then before that had been a number of years, and it's just interesting to have different perspectives on these buildings. I remember it being kind of, I have friends out there. It's not the nicest barn, the way I remembered it. And then, but I took, my partner out there, and she was like, she thought it was really cozy. She thought it kind of made me look at the whole building differently, at least until they play that godforsaken goal horn, and then blew that 4 times in regulation. I don't know how many times in the shootout. Did they kind of warn you on that one?
Not really. I was kind of just sitting there like, oh, okay. Well, that's a new one. But the new video boards out there are really nice. It's still kind of a little weird because it's the same that it was in Spokane. And I know not every arena has the video board in the middle, like as a jumbotron in the center, but having it on the sides, at least was on both sides, was really nice.
Yeah, I remember being in Spokane and being on the wrong end and not being able to pick up on the replays, and that was a little disappointing. Just the way the speed of the game, especially at this level, like you kind of have to have replay board, and also having a buddy system helps too. Like, hey, what happened? What did that puck go off of? Why is this guy in a heap? What happened to him?
Yeah.
So it's replays are huge. It's one thing I'm going to miss about the Moda Center this year is not having that in our pockets.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the Americans, the first place Tri-City Americans, and I'm sure they're
who thought we'd be saying that?
Yeah, I'm sure they're pretty happy about that. Obviously it's small sample size, but you'll take it. I'm sure they haven't had that kind of success in a few years. What kind of your broad brush observations on the AMs after seeing them in person?
I think they didn't get the credit they deserved. Coming into this game, everyone was kind of like, oh, this is going to be a quick win for the Winterhawks. I feel like at least most people that I talked to. We ran a poll for our podcast, and the Americans were decently by far the worst, like on the list. Got the least amount of votes as to who's going to finish atop, but they came out strong. From the first face-off, I was like, oh, they look different this year. I was like, this is going to be a team. And then as the plays went on, as the game, progressed, I was a little more nervous. I was sitting there like, okay, I think we just didn't give them the credit they deserved, but they look good.
Well, I mean, one of the wild cards there is, having Stu Barnes in the mix, and
Yeah.
And that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I mean, I don't think he's got a lot of coaching experience, but obviously hockey royalty, Tri-City alumni. I mean, he's part of the ownership group out there, so it's gonna. I don't know how you fire him when the time comes, because he's one of the part owners of the team. But it's going to be an ugly meeting if and when it ever comes down to it. But in the meantime, it'll be interesting to see what kind of techniques he deploys and what kind of flavor he brings to that club.
Yeah, and so far it's working for him. I mean, again, like you said, it's small sample size. It's been 2 games, but if they keep playing like they did last night, and if other teams slip up a little bit, then the Ams are going to be on the right track. They're looking good so far.
Yeah, I think the 99 Dallas Stars might come up later on this episode, but I think that we can shelve that for the moment. So yeah, it was interesting as far as the way that the Winterhawks went down. What was it, 3-0 to start the game, and then fought their way back?
Yeah. Oh, that was a little rough to watch. Kind of sitting there getting a little nervous at first. Coming back to tie it up was great to see. Wish it would have happened a little sooner, maybe. But also, getting goals called off in OT. Never what you like to see, never what you're excited for, but I mean, that fight back just to begin with, I'll take it.
Well, and again, I was distracted. I was watching a pro game at the time, and just kind of following along on Twitter. I will say that again, with the video feed acting up, I probably said it 100 times, but I was really glad that I skipped that one to attend. Yeah. The Kraken game in Everett, because I had mixed feelings about it. Part of me wanted to watch the Kennewick game on the video feed and not go to this game, and I'm like, if I would have not went to the Kraken game specifically to watch the video feed, it didn't work, I would have been so pissed. So I felt
I can only imagine.
Yeah, I felt like it worked out pretty good, for me personally. But I was following along, partially, with your coverage, and I got to thinking about, being the first, junior game of the year. Like, that is junior hockey. Like, you can go down 3 goals and just chip another couple of them in, and then there's a lead, and then there's a lead the other way, and then we're going overtime. And, it's part of why it's so easy to embrace, hockey at this level, and especially, kind of firepower that Portland usually has, because, it's certainly a lot more interesting than when a NHL game goes 3-0.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. When an NHL game goes 3-0, you kind of get that feeling that team's, falling behind on itself. It's kind of feeling a little more down. In the WHL, I feel like when your team goes down 3-0, you still can get that feeling of like, oh, the guys kind of are tired. They're kind of moving a little slower, but you also get that feeling of they can still do it. Who knows? Like, anything can happen, and I think that's one of the reasons I think I posted it that night, that the NHL will never be as exciting as junior hockey.
Yeah. I mean, I think I concur. I mean, you see a lot of those types of games. I mean, after again, trailing, Portland put up 18 shots in the second, and out 18-6 were the shots, and then outshot them 11-5 in the third, and that's just, I mean, that's kind of, in some ways you just expect that out of a Mike Johnson team, but that they're going to have that firepower. It's just, you want to see it show up a little earlier, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, you'd also like to see just a few more get in. I mean, some of the shots that were being taken, like, shot after shot is great. Getting those shots on goal, that number up, fantastic. Do your thing. But when your shot quality isn't at its best, if they're not going in at the end of the day, it's not how you win a game.
Yeah,
It's a
exactly.
little hard to watch.
Yeah, but you get a point out of it, which
Yeah.
I mean, this is if things go the way we expect them to go, that these points will count, as opposed to last year when they didn't necessarily count towards much, in the way of standings at the end of the year anyway. And so we're hoping that things don't go off the rails too bad, and you're building your way towards playoff positioning even from the first night.
Yeah. And I mean, it's got to feel good for the team too, going down 3-0 and coming back to at least take a point home with you on the road opening night. It's got to be a good feeling at least to battle back from that versus if they had just lost in regulation with like a 3-1 score. As much as I hate saying that right now, it's better than nothing.
Did you have the honor of voting on the stars at that game?
I did not. No.
Well, as announced in the building, the goalie Talon Boyko, first star, Parker Bell second star, Clay Hannes third star. What would be your stars if you were picking?
I mean, I probably would have been somewhat similar to that. Boyko stood on his head most of the game. He didn't, he didn't really let anything in that I thought, he absolutely should have had. There are a couple that, I was like, yeah, maybe. But he was outstanding. Whatever he did with the Rangers this season, it worked. Or this offseason, I guess, it worked. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of him, not necessarily looking forward to being against him. Parker Bell, he's one of those newer guys, at least to me, that I'm not so sure about, but he looked good. I mean, I know no one could see it on the video feed, but, he was out there, he was noticeable, and he wasn't taking away from anything from the team. So I would have agreed with that. And then Clay Hannes, he came out this season, and the first 2 games already, he's been a standout. I mean, you can go either way, Clay or Cross. Both of them have shown up. They've shown what they can do. They're being that veteran presence, and I think that this is Clay's time to kind of sit there and be like, yeah, look what I can do. And I was excited about that for him.
I was just, thinking about Parker Bell, and I'm probably not as familiar with him as I should be either. And I just pulled up his numbers to see, how long he's been out there with the Ams, and that 1920 season that, ended prematurely, for the playoffs. And I know it was tough sledding out there. He was a dash 29 on the season, and in 48 games. That's tough. I'm sure he's was happy to leave that one in the rearview mirror. And so far, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points in 2 games. That that's a good way to put yourself in the positive side of the ledger if you're scoring 2 points a game. That's that can only help your status in that regard.
Yeah. I did kind of think about it right now. I don't know why I forgot about this, but I maybe would have tossed Dwayne Jean Jr. a star there. He was a standout for me in that game, being a rookie and basically, outperforming, half of each of the teams. Jean Jr. is going to be one that I'm a little terrified to be up against for the next few years.
Yeah, a player I'm looking forward to being able to see play this year, and a guy with an interesting background, and proud of his heritage, and bringing the indigenous side to the game, which the Americans have had a tradition with guys like that, the Colton Yellowhorns of the world, and it'll be interesting to see him develop and find himself and move on. And it sounds like he didn't shy away in his first WHL action.
Yeah, and I mean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he got the shootout winner. So, I mean, he's already building a name for himself, and I can't wait for it.
I believe you are correct. Looks like so. That's again a pretty pressure situation in your very first WHL game, and that it's it's nice to see when a guy has success like that, even if it's not for the team that you're cheering for, as far as most listeners of this show.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, as much as, I always want the Winterhawks to win, Winterhawks will always be my number one team, but just seeing a team like Tri-City and a player like that succeed at this level of the game, you always want that.
Yeah, and Portland shooters, they had some of their top names go, and only one guy was able to light the lamp there. So they have their opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose maybe that's a bumper between the two games, between the home game versus Seattle. I mean, that's a thing that has been very consistent as far as the first couple games of the year, in the Mike Johnson era is, they have had these slow starts, and quite often that has to do with having players away at NHL camp. And it seems like every year they have 2 or 3 guys, that are, still in pro camp when the season starts, which is, I believe, 3 is the number we're working with at the moment. I remember in their glory days at 2012, 2013, 2014, they would have to cancel preseason games because they'd have like 15 players away, and they just didn't have.
We canceled one this season.
Yeah, they didn't have enough guys to fill a roster, and so. It's, and on the other hand, it's kind of like World Junior time. That it's a good opportunity for some other guys to get ice time and get opportunities, and you like to see that. But you're obviously a better team with guys like Seth Jarvis and Jonas Bromberg in the lineup.
Yeah, and I mean, with Bromberg out with injury right now, it's gonna be nice to have him back when he's ready. With the guys still at camp, it's still one of those we don't even know if they're going to come back. At this point, it's really questionable. But it's something that it was nice for the other teams. Seattle got quite a few of their players back. I'm actually not sure how many, if they even have anybody still out. And then they had a couple guys come back from injury that we weren't expecting. We found out they were playing on the second, and we were just kind of like, oh. When did he come back? So, I'm sure that has a little bit to do with it. And the slow starts, I think we were discussing it even with Mike after the game. I believe they lost to Tri-City in overtime to start last season too. So, I'm not overly concerned after 2 games. Don't love it. It's still hard to watch, but in a full season, I think they'll be fine.
I believe you're correct. I think they did lose in overtime to Tri-City to start the season last year. I think I was looking at that earlier today. I was trying to get a feel for again, it's silly to even to look it up, and I didn't spend too much time on it. But I was like, when was Tri-City in first? Last. Like when is this their best start in X number of years or whatever? And then I was just like, it's 2 games. It's probably not worth bothering with. But either way, I'm happy for them, and it's it's a fun time to start the year. You're better than losing those 2. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Granted, Portland losing those 2, still not what you want to see, but.
Well, technically one in the loss column.
That's true.
Thanks to the loser point, so you'll take that. But the regulation loss they had. I mean, what kind of your initial thoughts on the Thunderbirds game on Saturday night?
Well, okay, so part of where I'm standing is, Milik was at development camp for the Seattle Kraken. He came back, he's been a great goaltender. He came back and was even better. I'll take it. Giannuzzi hasn't been at a camp for an NHL team. He hasn't gotten that kind of hands-on, sitting down with him, working on certain things, being told by, NHL coaches, hey, this is what we're looking, this is what you need to do. But on top of that, the passing, Seattle seemed to be that stronger team. It was pretty apparent actually that Seattle kind of had their passing together, and I think part of that might just be, with getting O'Brien and Hannes back just a couple days before, they hadn't gotten in that practice with their specific lines, possibly. But Seattle had similar issues, so.
Yeah, it was, it had been so long since, we had a game in the Glass Palace, and, I imagine that everybody went through the same thing as far as, the fans and being away forever. And yet here we are Saturday night, against Seattle, and there's, a scrum, every 2-3 face-offs, and, guys are getting sent to the box, and, roughing, holding, tripping, high sticking, cross-checking. Just looking down skimming down the list of infractions that were handed out. It just seemed so comfortable to settle right back into to that matchup, that rivalry.
Yeah, and that wasn't too surprising. In Tri-Cities, it was a physical game. Like, it started physical, and it just didn't stop the entire time. So coming in to face Seattle, facing Seattle to begin with, that's the expectation, is that this game's going to be a physical, a lot of action going on. But 2 straight days of it, I don't know that as fans, if you were able to see both games, you were fully prepared for that, like, back to back to start the season.
We talked about, Seattle getting strong goaltending, but, there was a couple that Portland put past the goalie that didn't end up working out. I can think of one where, Cross Hannes, kissed the crossbar, and that was an interesting shot. It looked like it was in slow motion. It looked like the most feathered, finesse shot, and it just kind of kissed the crossbar and came back out. And I felt that he got lucky on that one, or the goaltender got lucky on it. I guess the shooter was not. And then there was the disallowed goal, the first time we'd seen the crease violation rule really kind of pop up. What was your take on that play?
That one was frustrating. There was a lot of talk after the game, especially talking to Mike Johnston. It wasn't super clear, like, on the ice what happened, so I guess that turned into another thing. But overall, it was confusing to watch, and then it was confusing when they explained it. A lot of it was, the puck goes in and out, the players in the crease, they're calling it, they had the opportunity to blow it dead, they didn't. There was a lot going into it that I think, we just don't see unless we're down there. I took a second. I wasn't entirely sure why it was even, called off at first. I had to kind of go back and be like, what happened? Unlike the goal in Tri-Cities, which was, goalie interference, whatever. We'll take it. Player in the crease. Not really sure what you're wanting there.
Yeah, for me personally, I was fortunate enough that I had it explained to me, previously before the season started. I believe it was on the Pipeline Show with Guy Flaming, which fans of this show are probably familiar with, and if you're not, you should be looking into to that podcast. Based out of Edmonton, but he covers our league and several other developmental leagues, and they had talked about this rule being implemented and how it's kind of a fuzzy thing. I've been describing it as 3 in the key in basketball, and as far as being in the paint, but at the same time, if you say 3 in the key, the number 3 is there. It's a 3 count. It's 3 seconds. It's defined. It's measurable. And I believe the way that this rule is to be called in our league, which is similar to international, is it's like stoppage time in soccer, in that it doesn't have a defined length of time. It's when the referee decides, okay, the offensive player's been in the crease too long now. And the way I saw this particular goal, I don't remember which Winterhawk it was, but he wasn't in the crease for more than a second or two. Like, I don't think it was long enough to trigger a stoppage. It just happened to be while the puck came by, and I didn't see any sort of interference. I mean, I teased the 99 Dallas Stars and Stu Barnes being on the wrong end of that stick, with the Sabres that year. It was kind of similar to that the skate was in the crease, but it also didn't really affect the play as far as my opinion. What do you see from the other side of the ice when I sit?
I mean, I didn't see it clearly at all. But from what I've heard from everyone is that they all agree with that. There was nothing that impacted the play. But it was just one of those, they had the opportunity to call it and they took it.
I mean, it reminds me of the phrase intent to blow, that sometimes you will see, there's a split second of difference between when the official decides to blow his whistle, but then before he can get the whistle physically to his lips, you don't think about there being a delay there, but there technically is. And so once in a while you'll see that to where, he'll call it and say, well, I had decided to blow this dead. It's just you hadn't heard me do it yet. And that's always a little funky too, because you play to the whistle, and you can have an intention all you want, but until you can hear it, that's a different animal. Like, I almost wonder if that was in play here too, because if you were going to call it by the rule of the law and say, okay, the offensive player is in the crease for too long, you'd have to blow it dead before the puck entered the net, you would think. But it was kind of a to be fair to the officials, I mean, it's the first game or second game that they've seen with this rule in it, so I imagine they're trying to work their way through it as well.
Yeah, I've not heard that much booing in quite some time, though. That much anger at some officials. Both was nice to hear, just because it meant that we were back, but at the same time, it was kind of like, well, I think they're just as confused as we are on this at the moment, so we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I get booed like that sometimes myself, but just not with that many people. And 4,500 is what the official attendance was, and it definitely felt like a decent crowd, especially being with the restrictions to get in the building and whatnot. It was nice to see people come through.
Absolutely.
Also worth mentioning, in that call, and I'm looking, and I'm trying to get a feel on what is going on with this call, this goal being called off and whatnot. And I think that was the first time I noticed that local official Jared Bowman had been promoted from linesman to referee, so that was interesting. So two locals as far as the ref, one of the refs and one of the linesmen in that game. So it's kind of, as Portland continues to move players in the up in the ranks and in different levels of hockey, they're moving some officials up as well. So side note there.
Yeah.
But so where do we want to go with that? So I mean, sometimes those things can be like a rallying point, though, as far as when you get the goal called off. A lot of times that can be fuel, as far as let's go out and score another one, and one that they can't wave off. But that didn't end up working out for Portland.
No, they did kind of come back out and work for it a little bit. It didn't end up happening, but I did see a little bit of that fire come through. Would have been nice to get it, but it is still early. They're still trying to put everything together, still getting guys back, hopefully. So just waiting to see what happens in the next game.
So was there any interesting information that you gleaned post game around the rank, as far as how the Portland felt that their game went and what they want to do moving forward?
A lot of it, I think, was just working on staying on their feet. Was a little bit of an issue going through the night, but also just kind of working between each other, getting that fluidity back was a lot of it. And I think that comes down to the passing game was not at its peak. It's not quite there yet this season. Um, but we did get to talk to Cross after the game, and a lot of his was like, I just got back 2 or 3 days ago, so I'm still getting back into the swing of doing things at this level. And I think that he and O'Brien kind of have the same mindset on that, where they're just kind of, settling back into how they were and how things roll in the WHL. Um, and that was the same thing that when I got to talk to Seth Jarvis after the Neely Cup, that's something he said too, was just that, transitioning back after playing with the Wolves last season was rougher than he thought it was going to be. And I think we're seeing that from the two guys we got back so far.
Yeah, and I think that has been a consistent thing that, we've seen with players come back from pro camp, players come back from World Juniors, as far as, playing on these all-star type of deployments. And, it doesn't, it seems counterintuitive to, a lot of us that didn't play the game or certainly didn't play at that level, that, you ought to be able to, when you drop down a level, that, you should be able to shine and come out of the gate flying. But it does seem like it takes time to readjust, and that's been consistent. And so we'll see again, some of the players already have back, and then players that we already mentioned, a couple guys that will be we expect to be returning soon, and or at some point anyway, and then we'll see how that adjustment goes too.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny we say though that Cross was saying, "Oh, it's taken me some adjustment time." I mean, he has 2 games in, he has a goal and an assist, and then a shootout goal. So I mean, if he's still adjusting, I can't wait to see what he does the rest of the season. But yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a big part, is getting those guys back and then having the patience to get them back to this level.
Yeah. Yeah, and Cross is also a crossbar away from, drastically changing the the landscape of this particular game as well. I think that was right there in the second period when they really could have used it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then I mean, also just getting that goal called off for Kenyoni. I mean, it would have been his first of the WHL. Would have been nice to see. I made not really a joke, but I made a comment earlier of like, his actual first goal is going to be really sweet. He's going to sit there and just revel in it, and I can't wait to see it happen.
Yeah, yeah, on those types of things too. I mean, it's a butterfly flaps its wings, that when you can get a rookie his first goal, it's usually a boost to everybody on the team, and and they get everybody pulls for that. They get excited about it, and if you can harness that, I mean, it changes the next shift and shift after that in ways that we'll never know what we could have seen.
Yeah.
So it's probably a little bit bittersweet part of the season for you, in that your live viewings are kind of drawing to a close here for the foreseeable. I mean, what are kind of some of your takeaways from the shift that you put in here, getting to go to the rinks and go on the road?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it's such a relief to see that fans are actually showing up again. It was a slightly smaller crowd than maybe we're used to seeing, but I mean, at the same time, after a year or almost 2 years, honestly, being out of the rink, having anybody back is nice. And then just being able, I think, to see the guys kind of light up when they do get those goals, when they have those big moments. It's big for them. It's big for us. We're going to see probably an elevated level of play than we saw last season, just based on the fact that there's people around again. It seems like such a small thing, I think, to some of us. Like, I don't think I took it in quite so much as, viewing it from home. But having people in the arenas is, that energy boost.
Yeah, it was definitely something the players said. I brought up this point on WHL Unfiltered the other day, that it's what we're seeing in college football and pro football, that they played with nobody there for a year, and and that crowd noise is has such an effect on that game. And so then it's once they started, having fans in the crowd again, it kind of changed everything. And we saw that in the pro playoffs last year, even down to where the Montreal Canadiens wouldn't have, we're playing an empty barn, and the in the States, in Florida, they would be, well, not, I mean, the state of Florida, not the team Florida, but they'd be a full house, and so it's kind of, you'd see that contrast, and, you can, I've heard a lot of, veteran players, probably not so much in this league, but say that they'll never take it for granted again. Like they'll always, really appreciate having the fans there, because it does changes the playing environment, for them, specifically.
Yeah, it's actually funny because a lot of the players I talked to in this league last season said, "Oh, it doesn't feel too different once we're out on the ice. We're still playing. It's the same environment." But I mean, you watch them, and it's not the same environment. It's a different feeling just watching them play that level that they're reaching. That you got glimpses of it, but it's not the same environment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're contradictory statements, but both things can be true, in that it's the right way to look at things, that you're just happy to get the games in, in the bubble environment or whatever we were doing prior. But, so you're telling yourself, yeah, it's still, I mean, the net's still 4x6, and, we're going to approach it the same way. But yeah, having that, I mean, it's, in any league, I mean, the balance between, the best team and the worst team isn't that different. And so, a little bit of motivation here and there, and a little bit of, being able to dig down and find an extra gear when you really need it, that's really what tips the balance. And so, I mean, having the motivation of fans spending their own money to come in the barn to see you play. I mean, that's huge,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it also though does make it a little harder to watch for certain instances, like some of the injuries. Sometimes when the guys go down, I think maybe doesn't help that situation of having fans in the arenas again. I think maybe when you're on the ice, it's a little different from how I'm seeing it from my perspective, but it brings a different feeling because you definitely feel a little more like the fans are a little, I don't want to say let down, but you can hear it just in that like disappointment, or that like hey, you missed a call. Definitely brings a different feeling, I think, to the guys on the ice too.
Yeah, concern might be the word you're looking for. Or?
Yeah, that's probably more accurate.
So speaking of buildings and crowds, Portland's next game is in Everett for their home opener. I just noticed earlier today that they have a special where they'll sell you a ticket and a beer as a combo meal, which is fun. Okay. I like that promotion. I like any promotion, but as far as being creative, and
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see that barn after being not quite capacity but very close for the Kraken game, to see like how many people show up. I mean, we've been, again, like we mentioned, kind of around the league. I've been looking at some numbers, and we have crowds. We don't have home opener type of crowds just yet, so we'll see how that picks up. But I'm kind of curious as to see what we end up with in Everett. What I think we touched on this last week a little bit, but it's kind of hard to read the Silvertips come in after this off season. What's kind of your expectations on what we might see Friday night in Everett?
I don't expect that Everett's going to stop rolling. I think they're not quite picking up where they left off in terms of scoring, but they're a goaltending team. They're goaltending, defensive. That's just what they do. That's why I think they balance out when they face Winterhawks. You never know who's going to come out of that game on top. But I think the more they see guys, like they got Ronan Seeley back from the Canes, and clearly he's been, doing well for them so far. We got the overtime winner and their season opener. they're not where we're expecting them to be, but they also, they lost some key players last season, or I guess in the off season. So I know that they're going to put up a battle. I think Portland, once and if they get everything put together before then, they're going to be just fine. But it's going to be another one of those. They're going to make the Hawks work for it.
Are you hearing anything as far as some of these players for Portland coming back by next weekend? Is that anything that you got inside info on?
I don't actually. Every indication that I have so far is that Seth Jarvis isn't coming back soon. Duro maybe a little sooner, but by next weekend, I don't know about that one. And then Newkirk got assigned to the AHL, so he's in Bridgeport for their camp.
Yeah, which is to be expected out of a signed 20, but not always the case.
Yeah. So not expecting to see him back, but it could happen. But yeah, none of these guys, I think, for the next week or two, I'm not expecting. Duro maybe a little sooner, but it's going to be interesting.
It seems like Jarvis has been getting some ink, some his name in the paper a little bit in Raleigh. I mean, how they seem pretty excited about him out there right now.
Yeah, I did see something earlier where someone was saying, "Oh, he's a quiet, unassuming, like calm guy off the ice," and I was like, "That's not the vibe I got from him at all." Talking to him, he's pretty upbeat, seemed pretty ready to go, and I was a little surprised. I had a little bit of a laugh at that.
Well, and that might be, several years into his, WHL career. I mean, he's presumably pretty comfortable around these parts, and you go to the bright lights, big city, and you're kind of like, you might
calm you down a little bit.
Yeah, I might be scared of pissing somebody's Cheerios or something if you're not careful. You watch out for that. But have we looked to see when 9 games into the Hurricane schedule is, and when that might be?
I have not yet. I've been waiting to get a little bit closer to the season, just on the off chance he comes back a little sooner. But that's something that I'll be looking into pretty soon here, because it's not looking promising yet.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, and and then there's always, I assume he's a top candidate for World Juniors if he's not in the NHL at that point too. So that might, be a tipping point as far as availability as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice opportunity for some of the younger guys to kind of step up, and even some of the veterans. I mean, we've seen Cross kind of come back and light it up a little more. I mean, he had a good season last year, but I think, like I said last time I was on the pod, he's going to have a good year, and I think he's shown it already that he's coming into this season going, this could be my time to be in like the limelight with this team. So looking forward to seeing him a little more.
And so, kind of jump around a little bit, but a formatless show is kind of that way. So we talked a little bit about Everett on Friday night, and then that sets us up for Saturday night in Kent, which is right back to Portland, Seattle Saturday night. I don't know if they're going to throw a fish on the ice. We'll find out how much Portland sucks. It might be a little, might be a lot. I assume expect a physical matchup. But you have any feel on how that game might play out?
I mean, it's going to be physical. It also depends on who's in net. I'm expecting that it's going to be Milik again, but either way, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a physical game. There's no doubt about that. Seattle's back at home. It's their home opener. They're going to be looking to come out strong. Portland's going to be looking to kind of redeem themselves from their home opener. So, it's going to be interesting to see, especially with Rybinski possibly being out for a while. Wasn't the most promising to see him go out in the first play, but Seattle's looking good so far. They haven't had too much of a reason for concern, having strong goaltending, having, guys who can score. having Matthew Rempe, for what it's worth. I mean, if they can stay out of the box, this team's going to be a little terrifying right now, at least early on.
It's funny you mentioned the penalty box. You set me up for right where I wanted to go with that. I was just, looking at the standings earlier today, as far as the Americans in the young season doing well. And, in typical Silvertips fashion, the Constantine lives, that you look at the penalty minutes assigned so far for these teams, and Spokane has 30. The Americans and the Winterhawks both have 28. The Thunderbirds in one less game have 16. And the Everett Silvertips have been assessed 6 penalty minutes in the course of the season, as opposed to 30 or close to it for these other clubs, and one less game. But it just seems like they tend to not take penalties, and you always wonder why that is. You think it would all even out in the end, but it seems like the Silvertips are significantly different in that column as the season carries on. And here in the first weekend they've already made their mark as far as carrying that tradition on. It's just something that's always fascinating to me.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I was thinking about during both games this weekend. Is just it felt like every minute and a half there was another guy headed to the box in both games. So, I mean, with Tri-City Tri-City and Portland having the same penalty minutes, I believe is what you said, they're going to have to work on that. Spokane being a little up there with that 30, but I do believe they had 2 guys suspended in their opening night. So, read into that what you will, but it's going to be interesting. The amount of penalties this season, I think, especially with it being maybe a little more physical with fans back in the arenas, is you might see those numbers a little bit higher. Everett, hoping for everyone else that maybe Everett sees a little bit. Also, though, it's nice that they're not. It's nice having that team that you can kind of rely on to not be taking those penalties. It's just a little rough to see everyone take them against them.
Oh, yeah.
It was a weird sentence.
Yeah. No, you're fine. But and it's probably worth mentioning too, and this is, I don't know if this is statistically, provable, or it's just, correlation is not causation, but, to start the year, you have, plays presumably going to be sloppy. You got guys out of practice. You got guys new to the league. You're playing with, line combos that you're not familiar with. And so those things are all going to, tend to rely to push you towards more penalties. You're probably also, jacked up, so you get a little more pushy and shovey in the corners. And then you also have, officials trying to establish themselves and trying to, set the tone in each game. And there's usually some new rule changes they're trying to put in. I mean, we'd see it in the NHL every year to start the year. They're really going to cut down on hooking and holding early out the gate, and then, well, here come the playoffs, and we're going to kind of just swallow the whistles and
throw that all out the window.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of, you think there's probably parallels in this league too. So you expect probably more power plays, early in the year, even if it, it kind of breaks up the flow of things. But, if it results in goals, we like goals. Goals are fun. So we'll see it. It's always a balance, I suppose.
Yeah. And that was one of the nice things in Tri-City is the power play for the Winterhawks seemed to be working pretty well. However, then we came home, got in front of a home crowd, and it disappeared.
So it's probably, a good time to start putting a bow on this particular episode. I know I asked you last week if you had, some projects you're working on, and, I hate to put you on the spot again, but, I assume you have some things in the hopper that you're excited about.
Yeah. I mean, I'm working on some stuff obviously the weekend recap from opening weekend, got pushed a little bit just because I'm trying to get ready. I leave back to California tomorrow morning, so getting ready with all of that. But, having the weekend recap coming up, and then, having some discussions with some of the guys from Portland, some of the guys from Seattle, just based on how they're feeling from this off season. and then hopefully getting some NHL content going for the Golden Knights as well. Stepping back into that a little bit more. So.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about how it's nice to be, in Oregon, in Eastern Washington, where you can attend the games. But then I was just thinking about going to California as the rain is starting to set in. That maybe doesn't seem so bad after all, the more I think about it.
Yeah. The drive from Spokane back to Portland was downpouring the entire time, and me being from California, I was not fully prepared for that. It went well, thank God, but I was driving and I was just like, oh, maybe it's a good thing I'm leaving soon.
Yeah, that can be a tough drive anyway, especially if you got, if you're on a time crunch, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Luckily, it wasn't too bad coming. Well, before we went out to Kennewick, we actually made a stop in Seattle to go to the Kraken team store. So we drove from Portland to Seattle to Kennewick, stayed in Kennewick for 2 days, and then went to the game, drove back the next morning, and went to the game in Portland. So it was whirlwind of a weekend.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work, but at the same time, if the weather is good, then that's offers a lot of really nice scenic views that a lot of places in this country of ours don't get to experience. That run from Seattle to Kennewick is on 90 and 82 can be quite nice.
It probably would have been. It was raining a little more. It stopped when we got to Kennewick, so it was a little iffy. A lot of the views, I was sitting there being like, "Wow, this would be really pretty if it wasn't like deluge pouring right now."
Yeah.
It was nice though.
Well, that's the trouble with hockey season, But then again, at least you went to the desert, and that probably helped too a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Cool. Well, we'll be tuning in to your work with Dub Network and trying to keep up on the features that you're putting out and the gamers as well. And for those of us that follow the Vegas Golden Knights, that will be a good source of information too. And I would encourage our listeners to follow along with Liz for both. I mean, Twitter's probably the easiest way to find her work if you partake in such things. And in the meantime, it's appreciate having you on, Liz. You got any final thoughts you want to throw out there?
I think there's just a couple guys that I was like impressed with over the weekend that I want to give them their moment. Not that I'm sure coming from me at this point is going to be the biggest boost, but I mean there's a few guys. Kenyoni and Pasternak, for example, were incredible. They stood out. They did their job. They're newer to the league. Pasternak's coming over from the USHL. They looked fantastic. And then you have guys like, obviously, Hannes and Hannes kind of standing out on their own. I think half of my notes were just saying that Clay Hannes looked fantastic. And then, like, Ryan McCleary, his skating, I don't know what happened, but he looked phenomenal out there. I mean, obviously there was a little bit of breakdown sometimes, but his skating just was gorgeous. I could sit there and watch him skate for hours. So yeah, I think that's what I'm going to leave you with.
Yeah, that's you mentioned the year-to-year improvement with McCleary. That's one of the best things about this league is seeing what happens in a summer, and some of these players will grow 3 inches and put on 20 pounds or whatever. Guys working with skating coaches or whatever. You mentioned, some of the advantage of going through a development camp, working with some of the, the best goalie coaches in the world, is going to have an impact on you, especially at an age where you're still, developing and growing and learning and all of those things. And so that's always a fun thing that, whoa, where'd this guy come from? Is that the same player we had before,
Yeah.
So that's, fun, and that will continue on here for the rest of the season. So that's one of the best parts about junior hockey for me.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. That's one of the reasons I think I push it so much for people to watch. Is it's also one of the best ways to learn the game is when you see that visual improvement in a skater. it's the easiest way to learn. Oh, that's what they're meaning when they're saying like, his transitions are cleaner or his passings, crisper.
Cool. Well, and developmental league for riders as well. And so, like I said, we'll be following along with your work as time goes on. And appreciate your time, Liz.
Yeah, thank you for having me on again.